Please welcome Robert Zimmer, the 13th President of the University of Chicago.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to Chicago for the Department of Energy Innovation XLab Artificial Intelligence Summit. I'd like to acknowledge the elected and government officials who are with us today, including the United States Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry, several leaders from the Department of Energy, Paul DeBar, Mark Menzies, Chris Fall, Connor Prochaska, the Chief Technology Officer of the United States, Michael Kratsios, and we will be joined by two members of Congress, Will Hurd and Dan Lipinski. I'd also like to express my appreciation to the Department of Energy for their work in organizing this event and for their leadership in pushing forward what is a critical United States effort in artificial intelligence with the broad sweep of its potential applications. And I'd like to thank Argonne National Laboratory for their work in hosting this event. The University of Chicago is proud to be an intrinsic and engaged partner in this work. We operate two Department of Energy national laboratories under contract with the department, Argonne and Fermilab, and we take with the greatest seriousness both the opportunity and the responsibility of this stewardship. Because of Argonne's extensive work on artificial intelligence, it's particularly important for today's discussions. Argonne was founded in 1946 as the first national laboratory, growing out of the work of Enrico Fermi at the University of Chicago during the Manhattan Project. We've been involved as a university in operating and stewarding Argonne under contract with the United States government since that time, and now through the Department of Energy, previously through some predecessor agencies. Argonne and Fermilab, together with the entire Department of Energy national laboratory system, are essential to the future of science, technology, and innovation in our nation, and therefore critical to both economic development and national security, both of which, of course, are always important, but both of which gain increased salience in an increasingly competitive world. Artificial intelligence is bringing together data-driven science traditions that until recently have remained distinct. The potential impact of AI in many areas is already being seen, both in the commercial sector and in science, even though all agree that we are very early in its development and very early in the scope of its impact. The potential for AI in science is great, while simultaneously being an emerging area. Scientists and researchers across the disciplines are looking to artificial intelligence to open up new areas of research and develop new techniques of inquiry and analysis. And part of what is so exciting about this entire development is the nature of a different type of inquiry and a different approach to inquiry in fundamental science issues and their application. Examples from scanning the skies to search for gravitational lenses to unlocking biological evolution of protein design, artificial intelligence is already playing a role in reshaping and redefining traditional fields. The full impact of AI for science, both in discovery and application, and the scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs who will advance it, will ultimately be realized only by strong, ongoing cooperation and collaboration between Department of Energy labs, universities, and the private sector. Aside from vigorously participating in the actual science endeavors, universities, in particular the University of Chicago, can play other distinctive roles, namely establishing the fundamentals and theoretical basis of artificial intelligence, addressing the potential ethical issues and the societal impact of AI-based technologies, and these will be great, training the workforce who can further develop and use these tools, and examine the ways in which these new tools can be used to improve the quality of human life. The University of Chicago's close relationship with our affiliated laboratories, Argonne National Laboratory and Fermilab, affords invaluable opportunities for all aspects of the needed DOE, university, private sector collaborative effort to flourish. Taken together, the collective knowledge, experience, resources, and infrastructure that these relationships provide uniquely positions the city of Chicago as a growing hub in this emerging field. It is an important opportunity and indeed a responsibility that we at the University of Chicago take very seriously. So again, I welcome you to Chicago. I look forward to 2 days of productive and thought-provoking discussion. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Paul Kearns, Director of Argonne National Laboratory. We'll talk more about the summit program as well as Argonne's current work in the field of artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. My thanks as well for your guidance and the great support from the University of Chicago. I am Paul Kearns, the Director of Argonne National Laboratory. It's my privilege to add my welcome on behalf of the laboratory for all of you being here at the XLab event. Also, as a Chicagoan, I live in the city, enjoy the city, really experience it fully on a regular basis. Really appreciate you being here. So we're pleased you're here. This is the fourth in a series of the XLab Innovation Summits, intending to bring industry and the national laboratories together to open a conversation and to build collaborations. In this instance, on artificial intelligence, its potential, and how we can work together to most effectively realize the great value of its potential. We've introduced two notable innovations into this XLab, one-on-one networking being the first. The response from you as participants has been tremendous, with over 1/2 of you requesting time for one-on-one conversation with a lab expert. The second innovation is the use of 4 parallel sessions. The topics are energy, manufacturing, healthcare, transportation, fields where AI will have significant impact. Many of the laboratories are using AI for research in these fields. I wanted to share a few examples from Argonne in this regard. In energy, we're using artificial intelligence to identify structural signatures and properties of molecular gases to discover new chemical pathways for cleaner combustion, for biomass decomposition, and biofuel design. In manufacturing, we're using artificial intelligence to identify and understand the impacts of defects in superconducting materials with the goal of optimizing the current that can be carried in superconducting systems. It's important to note that not all defects are bad. In healthcare, my favorite example is a multi-lab project called CANDLE, which is tackling the most challenging deep learning problems in cancer research as we work together to develop effective personalized treatments using the nation's supercomputing power. Transportation, many of us know the complex challenges associated with transportation and are eager to put artificial intelligence to work on increasing mobility, improving fuel efficiency, transitioning to electric vehicles, and providing insight into how transportation will continue to evolve in our urban systems. Foundational work really being done across the community is making notable progress in the use of artificial intelligence. Argonne's research in artificial intelligence began in the 1960s with the development of mathematical foundations for what was then called automated reasoning. This foundational work continues to influence modern AI systems. Argonne's work on software and data infrastructure is developing large-scale data management methods, software frameworks, and needed tools for artificial intelligence for science. For our work on hardware, the national laboratories are collaborating on the Exascale Computing Initiative to create 3 exascale computers, essential components of artificial intelligence infrastructure. I'm proud that Argonne will have Aurora, a machine built for AI, in 2021 through our collaboration with Intel and Cray. Aurora will provide world-leading capabilities in modeling and simulation, data science, and artificial intelligence. More broadly, our progress as a community is quickly expanding the potential value and applications for artificial intelligence. Investment is coming. The government and the private sector are working together to realize the value that AI can deliver and the impact it will have on our economic prosperity and security. It is a perfect time to have this conversation. We're pleased that you're here and look forward to exciting discussions and thought-provoking ideas over the course of XLab. I'll close by thanking our sponsors, whose names are shown here on the slide. Certainly they've contributed to really enable us to have a very productive conversation. We appreciate that greatly. I also wanted to thank DOE, as President Zimmer did as well, for really inspiring the gathering and really driving the leadership of the United States in artificial intelligence in that way. Now I'd like to direct you to a new video created by DOE and then invite Connor Prohaska, DOE's Chief Commercialization Officer, to take the stage following the video. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
I am proud to be part of such an innovative team here at the Department of Energy. One that has tremendous capabilities to impact people's lives in such a positive way. I believe we are at one of the most transformational moments in innovation that we have seen in decades, the golden age of artificial intelligence. I established the Artificial Intelligence and Technology Office to focus our priorities and strategies in AI. The office will serve as the department's hub for coordinating our efforts as a world-leading enterprise in the development, delivery, and adoption of artificial intelligence. Through this new office, we can transform energy exploration and generation for that matter. We can strengthen cyber and national security. We can enable new breakthroughs in science and medicine. We can literally change lives like never before. We'll do all of that, and we'll do far more by combining the power of AI with the capabilities of our supercomputers, including 4 of the fastest in the world. We can speed scientific discovery, increase energy efficiency, and improve environmental sustainability. Already, scientists at our national labs are working on hundreds of projects to apply AI to everything from traumatic brain injury to veteran suicide, from new treatments for cancer to accelerating drug development. And we can do even more, not just to move the needle, but to change the world. So I'm excited to see what the future will bring through our new Artificial Intelligence Technology Office at the Department of Everything.
Please welcome the U.S. Department of Energy's Chief Commercialization Officer, Connor Prohaska.
Well, good morning. As the voice of God said, I am Connor Prohaska, the Chief Commercialization Officer and the Director of the Office of Technology Transitions at the Department of Energy. It's my honor to welcome you here, but before I speak and get onto my duties, I'd like to say something. What I'd like to say is a special thank you to the entire Argonne team for everything they've done, in particular Katie Yurkowitz and all of the Argonne team that put so much work into this, as well as our partnership and investment team at the Office of Technology Transition, Marcos Gonzalez-Harsha and Marlon Martiz. I'd like to give them a round of applause as we get started here on their work. Well, as I mentioned, I am the first Chief Commercialization Officer of the Department of Energy and Director of the Office of Technology Transitions. And in that role, the Secretary and the leadership team have given us the mandate to work to make the maximum impact of the roughly $18 billion worth of research and development the Department of Energy does every year. We do that through 3 major efforts. Access, including things like our lab partnering service, which we'll learn more about and we'll talk more about, and making sure that we can serve as your front door. I often tell people that if you ever see the Forrestal building, it's not the most beautiful building in DC, arguably the ugliest, and you honestly can't find the front door when you look for it. So we want to be your front door at the Office of Technology Transitions when it comes to how to access the Department of Energy, and we work hard to do that. We also do it through policy with our colleagues at the White House and across the federal government. And then thirdly, we do it with promotion, which is exactly what we're doing here, and making sure that less people say, I did not know the Department of Energy did that. And we work hard to do that. When it comes to making an impact, it is my honor today to introduce someone who has made an impact throughout his career, as a rancher, as an Air Force officer, as the longest serving governor of the great state of Texas, and finally, as currently the 14th Secretary of the Department of Energy. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Rick Perry. I'm doing well.
Couple of Aggie boys doing good.
I wish our football team would be better.
Connor went to Texas A&M, so we were talking very quietly about Texas A&M football. Oof. August is so much better, don't you think? That's when the world is perpetually optimistic that your football team is going to go 10-0 or 11-0 or 12-0, or if you're Alabama, 13-0. So anyway, Connor, thank you to all of you. His team has done a fabulous job, and it's this Office of Technology Transitions that he's been heading up, and the men and women that work with him, bringing these XLab summits to places across the country. And I've been incredibly excited about this one, Rick, to get to come back to Chicago to see the folks at these two labs, and I'm about the labs like I am about my children. Publicly I don't say one's better than the other. They're all really special and good and great and smart and beautiful. And, anyway, so speaking of Argonne, Doctor, thank you for the work that you do in University of Chicago, and we've got a great team in Congress that has helped us, and I know there's a number of them here. Bill Foster, who brought me out here the first trip that we went on out to Fermi and Argonne, and Will Hurd, the inimitable Will Hurd, is in here somewhere. Congressman, thank you for your support and your years of public service and your personal friendship. And Dan Lipinski and what the work that he's done. So each of those are really hard-working folks. And Michael Kratsios and I have been on the road together a good bit here in the last few weeks as we've gone out to the West Coast and done some work out there. And Michael, thank you for not only your passion about technology and the work for the administration, but for the American people. You're a good man. Thank you for all the work you've done. President Trump and I have talked about this. Ivanka and I have talked about this AI office and standing it up, and the excitement that we see. And Rick, again, I want to point you out, not just because you always have cool footwear, but but because you're one of the people who ignited in me the real vision of what we as department could do together with the private sector, and that's what XLab's really about. And I hope all of you not only feel this energy and the excitement and the potential, but that this is just nothing less than spectacular from my perspective. And so anyway, thank you all for joining us today. It is it's a monumental opportunity, I think, for the country and in turn for the world, because America and America innovation is what really has the potential to change this world that we live in, and the potential and the opportunities, the excitement. And I look forward to hearing from all of you throughout the day as we go forward. And so the speakers that are here, thank you for taking time. Dimitri, the work that you've done to stand up the Office of AI is nothing less than, you get a special place in heaven, brother, for the work that you've done. So I'm really convinced that we are at a transformational time maybe more so. Yesterday I was out at Hanford, standing in front of Reactor B. 75 years ago, they started with an effort to change the world, and that's our history of being able to do things that maybe the rest of the citizenry doesn't think's even possible. And that's what we have in front of us today in this transformational moment that we're in. This is the golden age of artificial intelligence. And I'm certain that all of us can, and I'm pretty sure will, play a central role in this. We can ensure that we make the most of this opportunity, that our country remains at the forefront of this critical, at this critical time with this critical technology, and that we use AI's astonishing capabilities wisely to impact people's lives in a positive way. During this summit, we're going to hear a lot about how DOE-fueled AI can advance innovation and technology in almost every aspect of our lives, and it's appropriate that we do. DOE, that this agency is at the epicenter of artificial intelligence. I tell people all over the world that DOE actually stands for the Department of Everything. And I've come to really recognize that over the last 2.5 plus years that I've had this privilege to serve. But ultimately, this isn't about DOE. It's about the countless people whose lives are going to improve dramatically. The President, through his executive order, he recognized that American leadership in AI will be essential to the economic security of this country and the national security of America. And I'm proud to report that we're answering his call. With a 40-year track record of innovation and thirst for scientific discovery, our energy team is already making an enormous difference. For starters, we got the world's 2 fastest supercomputers, 4 of the top 10, and they enable us to analyze massive data sets, envision new possibilities, putting us at the tip of the spear of the AI revolution. Today, DOE and those 17 jewels that are formerly known as, or I should say, not formally known, we're not renaming their national labs today, that are formally known as our national labs, are right at the very core of that scientific advancement. We're strengthening national security, cybersecurity. We're increasing energy efficiency. We're improving energy exploration and environmental sustainability. We're enhancing grid resiliency and emergency response. And we're doing a lot more than that. We're using AI to help predict earthquakes, to boost crop yields, to optimize transportation and smart cities, to accelerate new medical diagnoses and treatments. And that's where I really see AI making just some stunning advances, real differences. AI is going to help doctors unlock medical mysteries underlying everything from prostate cancer to cardiovascular disease, from opioid addiction to veteran suicide. And in that realm, DOE is answering, again, the President's call for a national strategy through the President's roadmap to empower veterans and end the national tragedy of suicide. It's referred to as the Prevents Initiative. We're responding to this initiative to use AI to better understand the mysteries of the human brain, how to tell when it's been damaged, to work to find ways to heal it. In fact, we recently signed an agreement, some of you may have seen on one of the news channels. Sandy Weil and myself sat together and talked about the Weil Family Foundation, who've been a fabulous benefactor to the University of California, San Francisco, and their neuroscience department out there. And focusing on diseases like traumatic brain injury, concussion, CTE, that are affecting so many of our citizens and disproportionately affecting our veteran community. And we're doing all that by combining the healing expertise that we see out at UCSF and their Department of Neuroscience and Dr. Jeffrey Manley. And AI has the power to really change and save lives. And to me, that's what we signed up for. And that's one of the things that I've seen in our national labs is this incredible focus on making a difference in people's lives. Sometimes, Rick, you can't explain it to me, make me understand it. Lord knows he and DeBar try. But we know the potential that's there. Fermilab is using AI to develop a deeper understanding of physics. Argon's using AI for a whole range of applications, from delivering better engine performance, fuel economy, reduced emissions, identifying promising new materials for solar cells, advancing biomedicine to battle such things as cancers and antibiotic resistance. Argon's also going to be home to Aurora, a kind of a new interesting machine that the first of 3 planned exascale machines, besides just being 10 to 30 times faster than the fastest machine in the world today. Aurora's got 2 sisters. Frontier's going to be up at Oak Ridge, and I guess El Capitan's an interesting name for a sister, but hey, it's a new world, right? How did Lawrence Livermore? Just forget that. Anyway, it's just going to open up some exciting possibilities in the whole AI realm, and because of all that DOE's already doing in AI. That's the reason we recently established this office, the Artificial Intelligence Technology Office. We felt that there was really important for us to have a central focus here. So to focus our priorities, our strategies in the AI realm. It'll serve as our hub for coordinating our efforts as a world leader in AI development and delivery, adoption. It'll also help us transform energy exploration, generation, and strengthen our national security, achieve new breakthroughs in science and medicine. Literally, as I've said multiple times, change people's lives through AI. We'll go beyond simply nudging the needle. We'll actually change the world. And if there's one motto, I guess, one slogan that I would say that DOE could wrap their arms around and say, this is ours. This is what we do. It's that we actually change the world. That's why I'm so excited to be with all of you today. There's so much ability right here, right in this room. So much potential. So many ways that we can impact people's lives through the innovation and ingenuity that's just in this room. Sir Isaac Newton said that you could see a lot further when you're standing on the shoulders of giants. But today, right here in Chicago, the city of big shoulders, we're not just standing, but we're acting, and we're making a difference, and we're changing the world. Thank you.
Please welcome back Connor Prohaska.
Okay.
What a great way to kick it off. Thank you very much, Secretary Perry, for really summing up what we're trying to do at the Department of Energy. My next honor, this is something very exciting, is to be able to introduce Michael Kratsios as Trump's top technology advisor, President Trump's top technology advisor. Michael has led the development and execution of the administration's national technology policy agenda since the inauguration. Under his leadership, the White House has launched the National Initiative for Artificial Intelligence, also for quantum computing, 5G, broadband communications, autonomous vehicles, and much more. Michael has also represented the United States abroad as the head of delegations for G7, G20, and the OECD. Michael was sworn in on August 1st, 2019, and voted unanimously by the United States Senate and confirmed as the fourth Chief Technology Officer for the United States. Personally, I want to thank Michael for his steadfast leadership the entire time in the administration on initiatives such as the Lab to Market initiative and working to make sure that we have all the things we need to be as successful as possible at the agency level. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with Michael where it hasn't either started or ended with what can I do to help. With that, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Michael Kratsios.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here in Chicago. I was only here maybe 5 or 6 years ago, so it was a fantastic reason for me to make the trip here. As we all know, and as the Secretary mentioned, the Department of Energy is truly at the forefront of AI development, and it's a real pleasure to join all of you. 63 years ago, a dozen Americans gathered for what was then called the Dartmouth Summer Research Project on Artificial Intelligence. And what began as a small group of scientists has now become a worldwide industry, and America has really never looked back. Today, the United States has 8 of the top 13 universities for AI and 6 of the top 10. And just as important as the number of great schools we have, it's the impact of these scholars and what they can do in their field. American scholarly publications are cited 83% more than the average of global AI publications. Our innovative industries are also booming. America has roughly 2,000 AI companies, more than double our closest global competitor. We boast more AI unicorns. Those are startups that have a value of $1 billion than any other nation in the world. Of the 32 AI unicorns, the United States has 17. And when you look at spending on AI R&D from some of the world's largest technology corporations, American companies collectively outspent their foreign counterparts by over 7 times this past year alone. I think everybody in this room knows that AI is going to transform American industry, from breakthroughs in medicine to advanced transportation and more personalized education. The promise of AI is absolutely boundless. The U.S. has pushed the limits of computational power, and we have given our innovators the freedom to thrive. And today we can proudly say that America continues to be the leader in artificial intelligence. Now, the Department of Energy is at the forefront of this great era. At this stage, few investments are more important for AI than research and development, and AI R&D is fueled by raw computing power. America has more computing power than any other nation in the world. We have 5 of the top 10 fastest supercomputers, and as was just mentioned, 4 of those computers are housed in the Department of Energy laboratories. But DOE doesn't just want fast computers. They're also using those computers to solve some of our nation's toughest challenges, such as the opioid epidemic. Right now, DOE is using these tools to identify genetic factors that predispose people to opioid addiction and to develop less addictive pain medications. The Department of Energy and the Department of Veteran Affairs have also teamed up on a program called MVP Champion, using AI to improve health analytics and outcomes for our veterans. And as was just mentioned, the Department and the Weil Family Foundation recently joined forces in a public-private partnership in order to use AI to research neurodegenerative disorders and traumatic brain injuries. And only last month, Secretary Perry announced a new Department of Energy AI and Technology office that is coordinating everything the agency is doing in this important field. Now, as you can see, DOE is working in a wide variety of ways to develop and deploy AI for the benefit of our great country. The Trump administration is committed to maintaining and strengthening our leadership in AI on all levels and across all agencies, not just DOE. This is why the federal government continues to prioritize AI research and development. The administration recently released a new supplement to the president's recent budget, identifying nearly $1 billion in non-defense AI R&D, including over $162 million as the Department of Energy. This report is incredibly important in so many ways. It is the first ever review of agency by agency federal investment in non-defense AI research and development, and demonstrates just how diverse and extensive our efforts are across the federal government, laying out our spending across the Department of Energy, the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and many other agencies. And it provides a very important mechanism and baseline for tracking AI R&D spending moving forward. By breaking down exactly how we are spending our non-defense AI R&D dollars, we can better identify opportunities for future investment. We can conduct long-term strategic planning across the government, and we can find new opportunities for collaboration between the federal government, industry, and academia. Importantly, it demonstrates the increased emphasis on AI under this administration. Now, we all know that so much more about AI investment activity is happening across the U.S. innovation ecosystem, thanks to our robust laboratories, our private sector, and our academic community. So today our goal is very clear. This uniquely American ecosystem must do everything in its collective power to keep America's global lead in AI and build upon our success. And we must continue to do it in a way that embraces American values and our spirit of innovation for the benefit of all of the American people. Our leadership as a country is about more than R&D dollars. Our future rests on getting artificial intelligence right. AI will support the jobs of the future. It is and will continue to drive our economic growth as a country. It is advancing our national security and it is improving our daily lives. When we lead in AI, it will drive our free and prosperous future. Authoritarian regimes look at new technologies as another way to control their people, using AI to surveil their population, limit free speech, violate fundamental human rights. This is not the American way. Our vision for artificial intelligence is rooted in the rule of law, respect for rights, and the spirit of freedom. From the plow to the television, to the radio, to mobile phones and the internet, America's spirit has driven innovation, embraced technology, and in turn, technological breakthroughs have lifted all Americans up. As the President said in his executive order launching the American Artificial Intelligence Initiative, continued American leadership in AI is of paramount importance to maintaining the economic and national security of the United States and to shaping the evolution of AI in a manner consistent with our nation's values, policies, and priorities. With this vision in mind, earlier this year, the Trump administration unveiled the American AI Initiative, which is our national strategy to ensure American dominance in artificial intelligence. This is by far the boldest action the federal government has ever taken on artificial intelligence. Ultimately, the American AI Initiative has 5 main pillars. First, as I've discussed today, the initiative focuses on investments in AI R&D. The President has called for agencies across the government to prioritize AI research and development, as demonstrated by the new AI R&D budget supplement and the recent update to our R&D strategic plan. We will continue to leverage America's vibrant R&D ecosystem of industry, academia, and government to advance the most cutting-edge ideas to bring developments directly to all Americans. Second, we are working to unleash federal AI resources. We want to improve public access to high-quality federal data that can drive even more AI research and testing. We also want to make computational resources even more available for AI research, including high-performance computers that DOE builds and manages. The third pillar of the American AI Initiative is to remove barriers to AI innovation. Our goal is to promote innovation while protecting Americans' civil rights and privacies. We're developing official regulatory guidance that will determine how federal agencies should use AI in the private sector. We're also working to strengthen federal engagement in the creation of the technical standards we need for AI development and deployment. Our fourth pillar focuses on the very root of our nation's strength and success, the American worker. The President has directed federal agencies to prioritize artificial intelligence in their grants and fellowships. We're helping the American people gain AI-relevant skills through apprenticeships, workforce training, and STEM education, and other learning opportunities. And finally, fifth, we are promoting an international environment supportive of American AI innovation. This spring, the Trump administration made history by joining with our like-minded partners and democracies of the world that share our common values when we signed on to an international consensus document on AI principles at the OECD in Paris. These principles complement our own national vision, and we look forward to continuing partnerships with our allies. We will continue to develop new AI technologies in a way that advances innovation, promotes public trust, protects civil liberties, and maintains consistent with our common principles. Now, our holistic strategy will improve the development of AI, empower the American people, promote innovative use of technology, and stay true to our values while preserving our dominance. We start from a great position of strength, and we have a plan to keep it. I'm looking forward to working with all of you to retain our global leadership in artificial intelligence and to build on the amazing work the department has already done. I'm excited for the next 2 days. Thank you so much.
Please welcome back Paul Kearns.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to actually provide an introduction for Congressman Daniel Lipinski, who represents Illinois' 3rd Congressional District, which includes the southern half of Argonne National Laboratory. We actually have 2 congressional representatives, so we're quite fortunate in that regard. It's wonderful to have both of them participate in the summit, so wonderful. Dan is one of the few trained mechanical engineers in Congress. He's also was a university professor before his public service. During his tenure in the House of Representatives, Dan has been a strong advocate for robust support of scientific research, including artificial intelligence. He's been a champion in that regard. He has served in Congress since 2005. Currently, he is the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittees on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials, where he promotes national security, especially our transportation systems. He is also a member of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee and is a champion for more funding for the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Dan Lipinski.
Thank you very much, Director Kearns, for that introduction. It is honor to be here to address you this morning. I appreciate the invitation. I first learned about this hearing from Secretary Perry at a congressional hearing. And clearly, AI is a priority of both of ours, and I thank him along with Dr. Kearns for the invitation. It's a great, for those of you who aren't from Chicago, welcome. October is a great time to be here usually. But I don't really feel that way. I just walked 2 miles through the rain to get here. Coming from the train, I trusted that more than getting in a car. But I'm so glad that all of you are here today. I've already had some familiarity with the importance of National Lab System from my background as an engineer. But my appreciation for the National Labs, especially Argonne, has grown since I've represented Argonne. I'm pleased the Department of Energy is holding this event to give you a taste of their capabilities. I'm sure that over the next couple days you'll learn a lot about the great work that's going on at places like Berkeley, Oak Ridge, and of course, Argonne. Well, we're still working towards final government funding bills for next fiscal year. I'm pleased that my colleagues in the House of Representatives passed my amendment in support of Argonne's Leadership Computing Facility, which will soon be home to Aurora, the first exascale computer in the nation and possibly the world. I hope that as you learn about tools like Aurora, you will consider how you might foster future public-private partnerships between your organizations and these labs to improve American lives. I wish I could dazzle you with my vision of the future of neural networks and autonomous systems, but I'm just an engineer. Instead, I'm here to tell you why I think the fundamental breakthroughs in future AI applications you're working towards are so important. For the most part, I don't hear from my constituents about the future of AI, but I hear about the problems that we know AI can solve. I believe that artificial intelligence will be an important tool to address many of these challenges and more. You already have ideas about how AI could be harnessed in personalized diagnostic, targeted drug discovery, automated vehicles, climate change modeling, and variable electricity delivery. Because of the immense possibility that AI will touch nearly every aspect of the American economy and have implications for so many Americans' concerns, I firmly believe that Congress must lead policy decisions and strategic investments to support the transformative potential of AI. I appreciate the work of this administration, the work that they have begun. As you just heard Michael Kratsios describe, and I want to ensure that the coordination efforts begun continue. In April of this year, I introduced a bill called Growing Artificial Intelligence Through Research, or the Greater Act. And I have many people in this room here to thank for your input to this bill. If signed into law, this would establish a central coordination office to serve as a central point of contact on federal AI efforts. An interagency group would be required to continue the strategic work begun by the administration, including development of a 10-year strategic plan for public and private sector R&D in the U.S. I also want the federal government to better leverage your expertise. AI is a field that is changing so quickly. The federal government is struggling to keep up with the private sector. My bill would establish an advisory committee of non-governmental AI experts. You all here in a room will likely be the first ones called for this. This advisory committee will provide input about the state of AI technology and evaluate our success. I applaud action that Secretary Perry and others have taken to direct growth in AI within executive agencies. But there's one thing that can't be done without Congress, and that is dedicate a funding stream. The global race towards a world augmented by AI is exactly the kind of challenge that requires Congress to step up with commensurate funding. We need to continue supporting federal supercomputing facilities. We need to establish centers of excellence around AI. And we need to increase support for individual academic researchers investigating AI. We need to bolster educational efforts in computing and the human-machine interface so that my constituents will be prepared for the jobs of the future and you will have the workforce that you need. My bill will invest $1.6 billion over the next 10 years. It's especially important to consider dedicated funding in the context of our international competition. In 2017, the Chinese government released an ambitious technical strategy with AI at its center. They predict that by 2030, they will have seeded an AI industry worth $150 billion. And China appears to be making progress toward this goal. Analyses of the field indicate that the share of most cited journal articles originating from China is on the rise. We're in a global race for development and application of AI. As a runner myself, I view this less as an organized 5K, but more like a marathon relay race. Unfortunately, the course is not marked. To win this race, we need an organized team and a plan. If we win, the world will use AI-enabled technologies developed by American workers consistent with American values. What happens if we don't win? We'll use AI developed offshore, threatening American jobs and leading to applications misaligned with our values. The stakes are very high. Luckily, America still has the best fundamental researchers in the world, and this event is a testament to the commitment of government, academia, and industry in joining forces to address the challenge. Congress has been successful at marshaling federal resources to meet daunting challenges before. Just last year, my colleagues and I on the House Science Committee successfully got the National Quantum Initiative passed by the House. It dedicates $1.2 billion to advancing quantum information sciences over the next 5 years, and we're starting to see the implementation already. DOE will be creating multidisciplinary centers for quantum research and education, and a coordinating office was launched in March to oversee national quantum strategy. So, why shouldn't we do this for AI? I'm going to continue to push my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to give the necessary resources and direction to our country on AI. I'm here to ask for your help in doing this. What would you add to the legislative efforts I've described? And if you share in this sense of urgency, how do you think we can work together to communicate that with my colleagues? Congress needs to hear from industry and researchers about the importance of investment and policy guidance in AI. I think we're off to a good start with what the administration has done, but more needs to be done. I'm going to continue to be a leader on this on the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. My phone number and contact information are available on our website. I have Caitlin McGuire from my staff who is here today and will be here also tomorrow. You can meet her, talk to her about your ideas, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts, and thank you again for all your work in leadership.
Please welcome Dmitry Kuzanov, Deputy Undersecretary for AI and Technology, John Baldoni, Chief Technology Officer at Integral, Teresa Christian, Manager of Corporate Strategy, Innovation, and Sustainability at Exelon, Ray Rothrock, CEO of Red Seal, and Rick Stevens, Associate Laboratory Director for Computing, Environment, and Life Sciences at Argonne National Laboratory.
Good morning. I think this was exciting, a great start. Thank you to everyone for being here. I hope we're starting our conversation here in earnest. To frame just before we start the conversation, I want to really commend the President for signing the executive order on artificial intelligence back in February. Certainly to Michael Kratsios, Undersecretary Paul Dabar that helped move that over the finish line. At the Department of Energy, the Secretary has been thinking about AI now for a couple of years, and the latest step in this was just last month when he officially stood up the department's Center of Gravity for AI, the Office of Artificial Intelligence and Technology, to be the hub for AI at DOE, to help foster innovation, to break barriers, and really chart the course for the department in its complex missions. A few words, since we have a broad audience here, about DOE. DOE is a mission agency, as you heard the Secretary say, and it's about getting things done. We have to deliver things. We're on the line for things. We're responsible for making sure a lot of bad things don't happen. Which is a pretty tough responsibility. It's keeping the lights on. We worry about nuclear security. We have cybersecurity responsibilities, emergency response, environmental cleanup. We have collections of problems that if we failed, you would notice. If we're doing our job well, we're okay to be rather silent here. And it's an interesting place to be, increasingly buried in data. But it's a place that lives typically beyond market, which is why we have the national labs, which is why we have events like this. We are the biggest funders of physical science in the United States, not because we simply fund science, it's because our missions demand it. We support the national lab infrastructure because what we need can't be bought transactionally. We have to develop it. We push the labs to innovate, to partner, to push the limits of science and technology, and AI is one of these key areas we are trying to innovate. And so, on the short list of things to do is figure out how we are globally competitive here, how we position ourselves, how we develop new partnerships, and how we move forward together in AI in a time where we have to be more agile, more innovative, and more aggressive in things that we do. So we have a remarkable panel here today. We're really lucky to have this team. They were introduced, but I have to say, John Baldoni from Integral now, who we ran into, our relationship goes back to your GlaxoSmithKline days, as really the innovative thinker for that sector, for that company certainly, on where health is going and what we have to do beyond kind of our traditional approach. Happy to have Teresa Christian here from Exelon, Ray Rothrock, of course, for both the positive and the darker sides of the world on the national security, a CEO, an author. You might have read his piece in the New York Times just on Monday, I believe. And of course, representing academia and the national labs, because Rick is also a professor here at the University of Chicago. I think we cover a number of sectors. And so we might as well get down to it. I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves briefly, but really the first question, as you think broadly about the topic, is how big is the AI opportunity from your vantage point? And so, John.
Thanks, Dimitri. Yeah, my name is John Baldoni. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a stealth biotech company based in Boston called Integral. We are a company that has formed to explore how artificial intelligence is going to impact and transform healthcare over the next few years. Prior to that, as Dimitri mentioned, I was at GlaxoSmithKline. I have been 40 years in the industry. 29 of those years have been at GlaxoSmithKline. 11 of those years I was on the R&D Executive Committee, managing a group of scientists and engineers who were responsible for translating ideas into tangible things that could be tested at the protein level, at the cell level, at the human level, ranging from very early discovery all the way through the manufacturing of our products. I stepped down from that role in October of 17 to start up a artificial intelligence-driven drug discovery unit to really probe how artificial intelligence would impact the discovery of molecules and the proof of pharmacology of those molecules in a human setting. I retired from GSK in March of this year, and on April 1st I joined Integral to expand that vision to the healthcare sector. The opportunities for artificial intelligence in healthcare are profound. The healthcare industry has really served society. That when medicines are developed and put into the commercial environment, they transform patients' lives. Typically, it's rare when it is a fantastic change in therapy and outcomes for the patients. It's an incremental, sequential betterment of that patient. That success, as great as it is predicated on profound failure. A huge amount of work that goes on in the pharma industry is not successful. There are millions of molecules tested at the protein and cell level that do not make it into a proof of pharmacology in humans. Less than 1% to 2% of the work that's done in healthcare and drug discovery actually results in human benefit. There's a tremendous opportunity now to look at all of that data and transform the model using artificial intelligence. That is predicated on availability of data. There are a lot of data sources available in the public domain, but the vast majority of data that's available in healthcare resides in pharmaceutical companies. It resides in that failure, not the success. The success is widely publicized, the failure isn't. So at this time, when there's a confluence of compute power that we heard about today, that also heard about today, the education system is training people to use computers, and we have subject matter experts that can combine that high performance computing capability and knowledge with healthcare data, it's a great time to be talking about how we are going to unleash data to solve some of the problems and diseases that have been intractable for generations. Secretary Perry talked about traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress syndrome, psychiatric illnesses, Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, Parkinsonism, ALS, glioblastoma. These are all diseases for which the industry has not provided solutions, and where the opportunity for artificial intelligence to contribute to societal benefit using the data that's available in the whole, to unleash that data, to apply it to some of these diseases that have been intractable since humans have existed. There's a great paper that was published in March of 2018 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences from a small university in Massachusetts called Bentley, where they did an economic analysis of the investment in healthcare research, basic research, and how much of that has translated into benefit to society. And I recommend you read this paper because it really does highlight the importance of public funding in basic research. And between 2010 and 2016, there were 210 approved drugs. Every one of those drugs, the idea, the basic biology, was funded by a government agency, the NIH. Of those 210 drugs that were approved in that time frame, 84 of them were considered breakthrough therapies. And the funding that the NIH has provided for those was around $64 billion of public funding, which is translated by the industry into benefit to society. That is nowhere near the total investment in healthcare, basic research, that has existed in those years between 2010 and 2016 from the NIH. It doesn't include the DOE money that went into that. So there's hundreds of billions of dollars that are invested to get 210 drugs on the market in those 6 years.
So we're going to get back to the point on data maybe in the next question.
So I think the opportunity here, Dimitri, to summarize is there's an opportunity for the public-private sector to come together in a data-enabled world to make a big change in healthcare.
Thank you. Teresa, from Exelon's point of view, you have a very diverse set of responsibilities in the energy sector. How do you see AI as, the opportunities there?
Yes, thank you for asking, and thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel. So for those who are not necessarily familiar with Exelon, we have operations across the electricity value chain as well as the natural gas value chain in the entire US, basically. We're operating in 48 states, as well as the District of Columbia, including the regulated utilities of Chicago and DC as part of our Exelon family. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Exelon, whether you know it or not. AI is definitely an area of extreme importance to all of the operational activities of our business. And we see that in opportunities that are driven by the new types of data streams that are available and the analytical capabilities that are now, some of them commercially available and others still being developed and evolved, which can enable us to operate our business more efficiently. So we saw some examples already highlighted in the videos today. Energy generation, for example, Exelon is working very productively with GE through their Predix platform in developing tools that will let us use asset management algorithms on some data collected at our generation power plants to enable these power plants to run more efficiently, get longer life out of the investments that we make in those assets, and ultimately provide cheaper, more efficient power to the people that we serve. Another area where I see a very large opportunity for new technology and increased services to our customers is in the grid optimization space, where we're operating the distribution grid in a world that's increasingly connected. We have new types of devices that are coming onto the distribution grid. We're in a moment of transformational change in the energy sector with those new types of data streams and connectivity. So it's very important for us to stay engaged with the opportunities there from an artificial intelligence perspective. One of the ways that we're doing that is really taking advantage of some of the work that's happening in the academic research community, funded by DOE and others. And I'm really excited to talk more throughout the panel and throughout the event about work that we're doing, for example, through our partnership R&D program, where Exelon has really made a concerted effort to partner between our industry experts who see the challenges that we face every day in operating complex systems across the energy sector, and partner those with deep technical expertise and technology development opportunities in the national labs and in the academic sector. So I can talk more about some examples there as we go through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ray, you know, I read your letter to the editor on Monday in the New York Times. You were pushing cyber. I know you've written a book on that last year, and this has been a center of gravity for you also. You know, as you think about the opportunity, I noticed you didn't mention AI specifically in your letter, but I know it's on your mind. You know, where does the world look like from your vantage point?
Absolutely, Dimitri, and thank you for having me here today. In terms of self-introduction, I spent 10 years as an engineer, 30 years as a venture capitalist, and now the last 5 years as a CEO in a cybersecurity. And it's worthy to just sort of take for a minute. A good venture capitalist has great pattern recognition, which is kind of what AI does. And there are two big things in venture. One is technology. Technology is an enabler. The internet was an enabler. The CPU is an enabler. This ability to sling data around on a network is an enabler. And the real value of making an investment in a company is what is the outcome. And it's clear in the public markets that the world values outcomes more than they value technology. Interestingly, look at the value of Apple versus the value of Intel, for example. It's like 10x or maybe 20x in today's numbers. So in my pursuit of cyber, and when I was at Venrock for 25 years, I did 15 cyber deals, 8 of which went public. The most recent one was Cloudflare a few weeks ago. And those are outcomes. Those are outcome-based companies. They're not technology-based companies. And when I look at AI and I look at cyber, I think, and I'll just, I don't want to poke too much fun at my industry, but investors like simple things, particularly analogies. And the way I look at AI and data, it's like oil. We drill for oil, we drill for data. We move oil in pipelines, we move data on wires and wirelessly. And then we frack oil for different products. We analyze data for different outcomes. It's a simple analogy and it's extremely effective. So in all of your discussions in the talking to investors in the real world, try to come up with these things. Just a quick sidebar, I just can't help but point out that Secretary Perry, Congressman Hurd, Connor, and I are all Aggies. I just want to point that out. Absolutely. We'll talk about football later. So in the cyber world, there are 3 things that are really happening. One, there's the proliferation of connections. It's exploding in our face. We have no idea what's going on in the IoT revolution, which was highlighted recently in The Economist and other places, is just killing us. Also, when you connect everything up, you have a proliferation of targets. Credentials is the first target people went after. Then they went after money. Now we're talking about deception. We're talking about trickery. You know, it's very complicated, but this proliferation of targets is being enhanced by the proliferation of the connections. And then we have this immense infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, the pharmaceutical infrastructure. We're connecting it all up. And we're connecting it up almost without abandon. It's just incredible how fast we're doing it. So all is not lost. I'm a big believer in we need many shots on goal. That's the story of the Silicon Valley. I landed there in 1981. And it is about great ideas, get a lot of shots on goal, a lot of investment. They all don't work, just like they don't in pharmaceutical. And rarely does the first guy win. Example, in 1984, I founded a little company based on some reading I had done of Professor Feigenbaum. Some of you may know him from Stanford, wrote a book, Expert Systems. I started a little company. It didn't work out. But it was my introduction to AI that really got me going here. So, look, AI empowers the bad guys, but it really empowers the good guys. It's about threat evaluation, it's about defense evaluation. And at the end of the day, cyber is not just technology. This is one of the points I try to make. It's about law, it's about compliance, it's about education. All of that, cyber plays a role in, and data can have a huge, huge role there. The saying that complexity is killing us, AI is perfect for that. My company, Red Seal, deals with complexity. It boils it all down to fundamentals of what matters. And then scale. Making things big is hard. So the research industry, which the U.S. has the best labs in the galaxy, needs to, and I'm glad for the commercialization efforts and the reach out, because industry knows how to make things big. Labs don't necessarily, but companies know how to distribute good things big and fast. So I think it's about that policy, it's about that relationship with industry, it's about to make it big. And and at the end of the day, if I'd say, find me the perfect AI deal that deals with our personal identity safely, completely, and manages our privacy, that will be the home run of home runs, I think.
Thank you. Rick, how about from the world of academia and national labs? What's your view as a big thinker here?
Well, I've been thinking about this a long time. I first came actually to Argonne to work on automated theorem proving. This is what Paul talked about, the more public name automated reasoning, but we were trying to program computers at that time to prove theorems, right? So this is kind of a mathematician's kind of toy box, and it was the same technology that was underlying expert systems. And of course, that direction AI ultimately ran out of steam when it became clear that humans had to actually write the rules, right? Expert systems were constructed by people sitting down and writing rules, and same thing for proving theorems. We had to write down axioms, we had to come up with stuff. And what's changed, in the last 10 years, of course, is that we've got large amounts of data. John talked about this, data becoming available, the raw material, whether it's oil or fuel, rocket fuel, depends on who you talk to. You've got advances in high-end computing, right? So one of the things that has happened over the last 30 years at the labs is a huge push towards making parallel computing feasible. That started in the DOE labs, working with industry, dozens and dozens of companies, bringing that from kind of academic research out to the broad marketplace. And now every big computer is parallel. All the machines that power the internet are parallel machines. The third thing is that we've got these AI methods, right? So the thing that's powering the current revolution is essentially representation learning. It's this idea that deep neural networks in particular can learn representations of the data on their own without requiring humans to spend a lot of time crafting features and so on. And so these three things together, huge amounts of compute capability, very large amounts of data, and kind of advances in underlying methods are coming together. That's what's fueling everything. The challenge for us in science is, how do we harness that power in science and engineering? How do we come up with ideas for how we're going to use machine learning AI methods to do things in science that we've never done before, whether it's designing new materials, whether it's predicting drug response, whether it's understanding brain injury or whatever. It's how do we put all that together? How do we build teams? AI projects are fundamentally interdisciplinary projects. You need computer scientists, mathematicians, you need domain experts, you need people that know how to code, how to optimize things, you need data science expertise. It's not your grandfather's way of doing things anymore. It's really a fundamentally new way of bringing teams together. I think the challenge for this meeting and for everybody here is, how do we envision a way of partnering across private sector, labs, universities, to empower that. I mean, the DOE has biggest computers, you heard that over and over again. We also have thousands of scientists, mathematicians, computer scientists, statisticians, and so on. So we got a lot of raw material. And of course, we have data for science problems, and we can learn on that kind of data different approaches that are complementary to cat videos and the things that the internet world is doing. And we need to find a way to engage industry at a high bandwidth way to understand what are the new problems that people are imagining AI could make progress on, and then figure out if that's true. Can we organize ourselves to do that? And in the process, train a whole generation of students and figure out how we're going to build an infrastructure to support this. I mean, we are going to literally, transform what computing is about in the next 10, 20 years. It's going to be a lot more about building, learning models from data and integrating that with simulation in some kind of coherent form. And so it's a very exciting time.
Thanks. I mean, you opened the door for the data discussion. AI is fueled on data, and data itself is a pretty hard problem. I think each of us struggle with that, and I'd like to get your sense on how you think about it from different points of view. Maybe first with Teresa. Again, you deal with data that might be streaming in, that you're faced with speed, you're faced with different modalities. How do you think about the data challenges in order to make progress?
That's a great question. Obviously, one of the ways that we think about data, as you mentioned, is that there's these different modalities and speeds. So it's in the course of our operational activities, maybe giving an example is a good way to illustrate this as well. So one of our key responsibilities as an electric utility is to keep the lights on, right? So if there would be a winter storm in the city where you live and that might cause limbs to fall on wires, we need to send crews out to restore the service by repairing those wires and get the power back on as quickly, efficiently, and safely as possible. So in order to do that, relies on a number of different data streams that we maintain in-house for that purpose, including the type of data that represents the assets we have in the field. We need to know everything about the geospatial distribution of our system, but also about the operational crew requirements and what we can say about the weather that's coming in so that we can better understand what the impact is likely to be. So when we think about the opportunity space for AI in an operational challenge like that, one of the really interesting areas for us is to build analytics frameworks that allow for these multiple modalities of data to be combined together so that we can develop solutions that use all those streams in a coordinated way and solve the problem at hand. So ultimately, it's about solving problems in a way where the data may be something that we are always using, but it was coming from a number of different directions. And as we have more and more access to increasingly granular data or increasingly powerful algorithms that can combine those different data types, it improves our operations enormously. So there's, I think, a lot that we're still learning and evolving in this space, especially as the hardware and the algorithms continue to evolve.
John, you've been bending my ear on dark data for a number of years and access issues in pharma in general, and certainly more recently on social responsibility. Could you talk to us a little bit about data in this space?
Sure. As you indicated, I've been thinking about this for quite a while, and I ran this huge department in GSK that generated hundreds of millions of data points a year. And when I asked the teams during project reviews, have you gone back and looked at these data and what can you infer from these data that would predict or mitigate our having to do an experiment, which in our world is very, very expensive. And the answers were always, well, the data is disseminated, it's not curated, it's not annotated, it's not featurized, and even if it were, we wouldn't have the compute power to do X, Y, or Z. So I began thinking about this in 2012 and 2013, and at the time I was talking internally about this, and a few people on the external had heard me talk about this. I call this the dark data of pharma. As I mentioned earlier, a very, very small percentage of the work done in a pharma organization actually derives societal benefit. And society deserves better from the basic research funding that goes into the basic biology that I referred to earlier. There are a lot of public data sources, but the largest amount of data on how molecules interact with biology at the protein level, at the cell level, at the organ tissue level, and then at the human level resides in pharma, and it's kept in pharma. And I refer to that as the dark data. Now, we began talking in 2016 with you, Dimitri, and some of your staff, Jason and others, Jason Paragas and others, about what would happen if we formed a public-private partnership between my former company, GSK, and Lawrence Livermore Labs, and the National Cancer Institute, how would we use those data? And we took a long time. It's very difficult to form a public-private partnership with a private company and 2 federal agencies. And then at the last, in the last few months of the discussions, University of California, San Francisco, a very forward-thinking university, wanted to get involved in this. But we got it done. And the vision was, as Rick pointed out, to put people in one place, to put subject matter experts, to put data scientists, to put computer scientists, to put engineers in one place. And we picked a place in California in Mission Bay, 499 Illinois Avenue, 4th floor. And it's great.
Next to Warrior Stadium.
Next to the Warrior Stadium, which wasn't even begun groundbreaking when we started talking. So GSK very generously and seamlessly donated information on 2 million molecules that it had no more interest in. And these were molecules that we had a deep understanding of how they interacted in biology at those levels, at the protein, cell, tissue, human level. The challenge was to get that data in an analyzable form, and it took the consortium that we put together is called ATOM, Accelerating Therapeutic Opportunities in Medicine. It took around 6 or 7 months to get that data into data sets that we could actually use. So we began looking at how we can design a molecule using high-performance computing and that human intelligence that we had assimilated and accumulated in one place. And Jim Brazzi's in the audience today, I know, and if you have an opportunity to talk to him about this. But they did an experiment using that dark data about a year after it was curated. And it was to design a molecule for a specific cancer target that's of interest in the industry. And they used simulations and they optimized that molecule in a multi-parameter optimization in a compute run against toxicology, distribution, efficacy, the ability to synthesize the molecule, and the ability of the molecule to distribute in tissue. It took 16 hours to come up with 200 virtual molecules that weren't in the training set. In those 200 molecules was a molecule, when they looked at those virtual molecules and said, are those molecules actually available? There was one molecule in that virtual set that wasn't in the training set that's actually in phase 2 clinical trials for that cancer target. On average, to get a molecule that would make it to phase 2, to discover the molecule, the molecular entity, on average, in the industry, takes about the testing of millions of compounds, synthesis of tens of thousands of compounds, and takes about 5 years.
So what
that
was
computer
key there?
run took 16 hours.
I think what was key there was developing an AI workflow, opening up data, new partnerships as kind of the key enabler for this.
Key enabler there. It's exactly as you said. It's the workflow. It's the identification of the data, the curation, the ingestion, the featurization, creating the models that are put in a multi-parameter operation. Within, I understand it's the IBM supercomputer at Livermore where this happened. Thank you. It is phenomenal. This paper will be published. It was presented at a symposium, and we've shown it to a few people in the industry, and it's mind-blowing what's happened here.
I want to shift from maybe dark data to kind of the dark side of data and go back to Ray on some of the things that you were talking about a moment ago. As we think about adversarial AI, as we think about stronger interconnectivity with 5G, as you think about distributed intelligence and kind of an attack surface that's simply opening up, how do you think of the world of data through that lens, and what are your concerns?
Well, through the lens of if you had all the data available and you could process it, which we will eventually, I would worry a lot on impersonation. There's already plenty of it. We all have been phished. I presume everyone knows what phishing is. And that's a simple little text email thing that tries to get you to do something. But what if, and if you go to Black Hat or DEF CON, they always show this, now I think it's an infamous video of President Obama giving a speech which he never gave. And it's terrifying. It is simply terrifying that you can create, through data, through compute, a deceptive speech. As a CEO, my CFO has received many requests from me to send money to you, Dimitri. And we shut it down. But eventually they'll get a phone call, and it'll be my voice. And so what do you do about that? So I think you can flip that on same coin, the other side. I am a person, I have certain behaviors and habits and so forth. And if my actions are tested, when a decision is made as a leader, political leader, financial leader, whatever, science leader, if that decision could be taken through an AI filter to see how far off would that be expected from what I might decide. And if it's way out there, then you escalate. So, well, what's driving that decision? That is the power of it. That's what law enforcement can do. I mean, we use expert witnesses in the court all the time. Why can't AI become an expert witness? But you need a lot of data, you need a lot of compute. But you got to have this behavioral framework of how a particular person, leader, whatever, behaves. Well, with whatever it is, 7 billion people, I mean, it's very, very complicated, as you can imagine. But that is an application of how to take that dark side capability of impersonating and flipping it around for law enforcement to say, is this something this person would have done or not done? And that's just one example that I know there's a group in New York working on exactly this problem. So it's a real deal.
To get to that point, it's going to take a trained workforce. Rick, you've pushed the sense that in training, from your point of view, it's not onesies and twosies. It's going to take a real concerted national effort. How are we going to get there? How do you think of the workforce we're going to need for this, really emerging golden age of AI that we see before us?
Well, there's two things. One is that the other day I was giving this talk, and I was looking around for how to estimates of how many people in the United States claim to have expertise in AI. This was a curious thing. So if you go back to LinkedIn, which is everybody knows is a very accurate way of judging what people actually are able to do. And back in like 2017 or so, there were about 8,000 people on LinkedIn that said they were experts in AI and had 5 years experience or something like that. By 2018, that number had jumped to 20,000 with 5 years experience. So in 1 year, all of a sudden, somehow they were doubling the number of people that claim to have more than 5 years experience in AI in 1 year, which of course isn't possible. So people are recognizing that there's a huge demand for this expertise, right? The country has about 60,000 computer science students every year that we graduate, right? And only a fraction of them are actually studying deep training in AI. So we're going to have to, of course, and it's a hot topic right now. I mean, at Chicago, all the AI classes are overflowing. Same thing across the country. So we've got to train a lot more people in the underlying methodologies for AI, and universities are doing a reasonable job of doing that. We've got to probably create relationships between faculty and companies that need that expertise, right? So people we don't drain academia with the people that actually know how to do it, and this has been a big problem, right? People moving to tech companies. But then we've also got to retrain people, right? We've got to, people that work with data need to become aware of what you can do with AI, whether it's fake AI, whether it's generative adversarial systems for generating fakes, can we use AI to clean up the data? Can we produce more training data by cleaning up the data that we already have? And is that something we can train people to do? So there's a whole ecosystem that we have to build, and we have to build it incredibly quickly. And some of that will happen at universities over time, but a lot of it's going to have to happen in the private sector through novel means, whether it's micro courses, online stuff, right, self-paced tutorials and so on. But we're going to have to move. And fortunately, people are interested in this. So this is not I mean, there may be some people resisting the fact they have to learn something new, but that's not my experience. My experience is you can fill up a room just like this if you have tutorials on how to apply AI or make progress in AI in some domain, and we have to, just do more of that. For sure.
Earlier you mentioned, the world values outcomes. I've heard you say also recently, that you think we're failing in the training, and kind of the gap that we need to fill is we need the equivalent in AI of plumbers, electricians, and carpenters. What should we be doing?
Yeah, it's a very big deal. I'll drive it deep into cybersecurity. So there are about, in the world today, you can add it up, about 2 million openings. About 400,000 in the United States of these electricians, plumbers, and carpenters in the cybersecurity AI space. These are the people that run, manage, improve, take down the software that all the engineers and scientists create. And just some real examples, the cyber industry is about 126 billion. There are 3,000 products out there. And a typical large corporation, probably like Exelon, has 50 or 60 cyber products and only 5 or 10 people to operate it. Well, that number, it's a crushing situation. And while you need engineers, for sure, you also need technicians. And so there's a massive opportunity. I've invested in a couple of education deals, but exactly your point, you can fill the room. They don't need a 4-year degree, they need a piece of it. So what are the fundamentals, and in particular AI? I mean, AI is such a broad term. We have to get specific about that outcome. And I think there's certification. Again, this goes to compliance and regulations and other things that our government's really good at. This building was built and we feel very safe here. We got to have that exact same feeling in the world of AI and in this technology that we're deploying in our lives. And it's going to take a lot of people to do it, and not just engineers and scientists.
Teresa, from the point of view of the energy sector, how do you think of the workforce needs and challenges?
Well, I certainly would agree with all the comments that you've both made already. I think we're also kind of looking at the workforce needs both internally and externally, that we expect that there's going to be people who are getting trained in other places come in with the type of expertise to run these systems, whether it's in the technician role or the more senior expert roles. But we also are being very intentional about bringing our internal workforce up to speed with the types of skills that they're going to need in data-driven businesses. So we're doing a lot of internal workforce training through some of our analytics initiatives internally at Exelon. And we're sort of finding ways to be more collaborative between our corporate, our in-house experts and the external community. So structures for that are extremely valuable as well.
We're in the early days of AI. It's moving faster than Moore's Law in terms of how fast it's changing day to day, week to week. As we think about partnerships and building in agility, John, you started talking about the ATOM consortium, but more broadly in the health space. What's it going to take to be sufficiently agile to be globally competitive in this space in terms of partnerships and mechanisms to do things that we're not doing today?
Yeah, so when I think about artificial intelligence in healthcare, I break it into 6 segments. It's the diagnosis of the disease, understanding the biology of disease, understanding how you modulate that biology with molecular interventions, how you test the hypothesis of that modulation in a clinical setting, how you translate that clinical testing into a commercial product where society actually derives benefit from all that work, and then understanding the financial and economic implications of artificial intelligence in that ecosystem of diagnosis, understand biology, modulate the biology, test it, and commercialize it. And one of the things that I've seen is that people want to stay in their silos. They want to look at this and say, well, I am this kind of a person, I'm this kind of a subject matter expert, and I'm going to optimize my part of this, my silo, using artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, whatever. And that kind of blinds them to the opportunity of integrating the whole ecosystem and say, how does a diagnosis of a disease impact the drug discovery effort? What are the biomarkers that they're picking up in diagnosis, and what is that telling me about how I could discover a drug? right, against those diseases that I referred to earlier. So one of the things that I think has to happen is that there has to be a confluence of technology and people that work on a problem in a matrix organization to solve the problem. Not to solve a piece of the problem, but to solve the problem, the outcome, as you referred to. And in a way, I've experienced this in my former life and in my current life, and it manifests in many different ways. People bring their biases to the table. And one of the ways that I found it very successful in breaking that biases, in the healthcare, I have brought people into my organization who knew nothing about healthcare. And they came up with revolutionary ideas based on their experience and applied them to the healthcare problem. And it just shows different light. It just shines a different light on the problem. The perspectives are very good. So I'm a real big believer in bringing in disciplines that are orthogonal to the problem, whether it's healthcare or energy or whatever, but just bring in people that are orthogonal to the problem and let them shine some different lights on the problem.
Thanks. You know, Rick, with this audience here that's, ripe for this conversation with transportation, health, manufacturing, and energy represented, from the point of view of the labs and novel partnerships, what is the message from National Labs, if I could use you to channel that to the people here on how everyone should be thinking about partnerships in the next 2 days and as we move forward?
Well, I think the first message is we're kind of open for business. I mean, that's the first thing. Second thing is that we're hungry for interesting problems that are going to challenge people. One way you get National Lab scientists motivated isn't by throwing money at them necessarily. That helps, of course, but giving them a problem that they find so compelling that they're going to stay up all night and work on it over and over again, right? And I'm sure in this room there are people from industry that have some of those problems that keep them up at night, whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's grid stability or whether it's drug development. I mean, it's all these things people are thinking about. We somehow have to have a high bandwidth conversation in these one-on-one meetings, the 100 or so that are scheduled and the 1,000 or so that happen in the breaks at the bar. We need a high bandwidth conversation to kind of just throw all the ideas up and get people talking about what might be possible. And I really like John's comment about bringing people in that are kind of from outside of the space. So, that we don't know how to do these things. I mean, I would say that, right? I mean, we're early in the game. We're moving fast, and we have to fail quickly and keep going. And that means we're going to try a lot of things without fully understanding whether they're going to work. And that's just fine. I mean, that's kind of how rapid progress happens. And I think the labs are good partners in doing that. People are used to trying things. People want to be aggressive. We got great infrastructure. We have to, of course, get access to data and make it available so people can play with it, but we can protect data, so that's not really a problem. So I think, and the labs are kind of our honest brokers. I mean, the labs aren't in it to make a share of the profit on the outcome or whatever. We're there to advance the state of the art. So all of those things, I think, could contribute to a really interesting set of approaches to problem solving.
So we have, unfortunately, only about 2 minutes left, and so I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to kind of add a few words on things that we didn't get a chance to cover. Maybe starting with you, Ray?
Me, okay. This partner, I just want to touch on the partnership. So everybody has distinctive competences, and corporations have over time figured out what they do best and they outsource the rest. And it's bringing those ideas back together, which John mentioned and Rick mentioned, this cross-fertilization. We did this at Tri-Alpha, which is an aneutronic fusion company in Southern California. We partnered with Google. And we took 5 years of experiments and accomplished something on our own, and then we did Google, and it took us 1 year because we could eliminate a lot of experiments based on, with 6,000 knobs on this machine, you run a lot of experiments. And we shrunk it all into a year. So $500 million, $100 million. So the economic impact of that. So that's just the last point. When you bring ideas together, you share confidences, and then you bring in the money, you can actually do things that are hugely forward-moving in this area. Sorry, it was much more than you expected. Sorry.
Teresa?
Yeah, echoing on both of those comments, I think it's been our experience at Exelon and my personal experience in interacting with national lab scientists on some of these really concrete problems and challenges, that when you get people in a room and they're all working on the same thing but coming from these different perspectives, whether it's the industry expertise or whether it's the research creativity and deep technical knowledge, great things can happen. So, and I just want to put in a plug that we have a technology showcase booth about one of the projects we're doing with Argonne. So I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I hope you'll stop by. It's fun stuff.
John, final words?
Yeah, quickly, it's very obvious that there are diseases out there that humans alone cannot solve. And this is the time to really think about how human intelligence, artificial intelligence, comes together in an economic environment that's enabling solutions of those diseases. These diseases are going to cost, just dementia alone, estimates that by 2050, it's going to cost this country $50 trillion a year. 10% of that is out of pocket for people. These are diseases that have to be solved.
Rick, last word?
Well, let's say that working, one word, yeah, fun, F-U-N, fun. Working on AI problems is a blast, and I think that's why it's easy to fill up the room. I mean, trying to get the machine to do something that we don't know how to do, that's maybe hidden in the data, and discovering that is a ton of fun. And that's why we need to get young people engaged in this and get old people engaged in this, because everybody knows we need more fun. So.
Thank you to the panel. Please stop by the AITO booth. Say hi to Bill Turin over there. Get some free stuff and sign up for the newsletter. Thank you again. Thank you for your time. And thank you again to Argonne.
Please welcome back Connor Prohaska.
What a great panel to start it off with, and thank you, Dimitri, and all the panelists for some great insight. Once again, I have another honor of introducing a very exciting guest. Our next speaker is going to talk a little bit about the national security imperative around artificial intelligence, and there's nobody better to talk about this topic and tell you the topic from more or less the Hill's view and what's going on nationally as far as our legislative branches are concerned. Will Hurd is a San Antonio native, and as you heard Ray mention, also a Texas A&M graduate, and the second best student body president that school ever had, I think, Will. Will, before being in Congress and elected in Congress in 2014, served as an officer in the CIA and really planned on spending his career in the CIA, but realized that his expertise could really be utilized and maximized to the national security agenda from a position in Congress and a leadership position. And he really has been a great and inspiring mind since 2014 in that role. Will has driven the conversation on artificial intelligence, national security, privacy, and a number of other very, very complicated issues that the Hill is currently trying to tackle. He is an inspiring mind. He is a great leader and a great friend, and it's my honor to introduce Congressman Will Hurd.
You know, all these Aggies talking about, artificial intelligence, what does that say about us, Ray? And excuse me, if you don't like anything that I say in these remarks about artificial intelligence, you can blame John Kelly, because like everything I've learned about AI, I've learned from John and what they were doing. This is, my degree is in computer science. And I was exposed to technology as a sophomore in high school. The Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio had a program that was funded by the National Science Foundation called the Young Engineers in Science Program. 20 students in my school district had the chance to work at Southwest Research Institute. And I worked with a young female engineer who was an expert in robotics. Now, I didn't know what a sophomore in high school, who my only technical capability at that time was typing 75 words a minute, was going to be able to do for robotics, but it gave me an exposure to a technology, to an interest in this subject. So it's great being able to work on this issue in Congress. I was at an event recently where I was with one of the original engineers of the Voyager 1 program. And Voyager 1 was built a month after I was born, so it was built in September of 1977. And when the scientists and engineers designed Voyager 1, they believed it was going to be reporting back to us for 3 to 5 years. Right? Voyager 1 is still reporting back to us today, 42 years later. Right? It's the first man-made object to go into interstellar space. And you know what the onboard memory of Voyager 1 was? 40 kilobytes. Right? That's crazy. It's crazy to think what we learned so much about our solar system. Right? When I was in school, Pluto was a planet. Then it wasn't a planet. Now it's a planet again. I am pro Pluto being a planet. But it is the technological change we're going to see in the next 30 years is going to make the last 30 years look insignificant. And y'all are all on the cutting line. But we have to maintain American leadership in next generation technology. American leadership in advanced technology has been an essential part of our political and economic power since the Second World War. But unfortunately, we have entered an age where America's military or economic dominance is no longer guaranteed. That's not my opinion. That was the opinion of a bipartisan group of folks back in 2018. Generals, diplomats, CEOs, academicians that determine that our military and economic dominance is not guaranteed. And so in this new age, leadership in advanced technology is going to determine who sets the rules of the road in a global economy. And if America loses its advantage, it's going to have a devastating effect on our economy, on our national security, and I know we won't let this happen. And I'm glad my friend, Secretary Perry, is working on these issues and bringing folks like you all together on this. We know technology in the wrong hands threatens our values and the very underpinnings of our free society. China is not using facial recognition to make it easier to buy groceries in the grocery store. Right? We know that they're developing it to continue to oppress their citizens. We know right now in Xinjiang province, the Chinese government has erected a technological surveillance state that has brought Orwell's 1984 into the 21st century. Hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs are being tracked daily for potential disloyalty, and more than 1 million have been arbitrarily detained in concentration camps. Silence in the West about China's use of technology to oppress an entire ethnic group only serves the interests of the Communist Party. It also ignores the fact that Xinjiang is a test bed for a surveillance state that the Communist Party wants to erect in the rest of China and export to other authoritarian regimes. China, we all know, has been clear about its intentions back in 2015 when it released its Made in China plan. By 2049, when they're celebrating 100 years of communist rule, they want to be the world's leader in advanced technology manufacturing. Many countries, both friends and adversaries, are making advances in AI. We know Chinese companies are trying to develop AI chips that surpass the capabilities of what American companies like NVIDIA, Qualcomm, and AMD can produce. Russia is preparing to release an AI strategy that focuses on research, workforce development, healthcare, and regulation, and builds on Russia's concentrated investments in military applications in AI. We all know, and I have to remind folks, that Vladimir Putin said whoever masters AI masters the world. I think this is the only thing I agree with him on. Allies like Japan and the UK and Germany have put our national AI strategies that are already guiding their research, regulation, and workforce development plans and efforts. Now, I'm encouraged by efforts like the adoption of AI principles by the OECD. This was at the urging of the US, but we have to do more here at home and with our allies. We must ensure that America leads in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and other technologies that will define the course of this century. Having spent time at IBM's labs yesterday and seeing their quantum and seeing the only continuously working quantum commercial computer was pretty cool. If you haven't seen the pictures, not only it looks good too, right? It works and it looks good, right? When I was in the CIA, one of my mentors always said the sizzle is as important as the steak. So one of the things that we need to do, and I'm working on, is developing a national strategy on AI. This is going to include key priorities. We got to increase the resources devoted to research and development. That's critical. And the government would also set an example by leading the way on adopting AI, and that's going to save taxpayer dollars, and it's going to make the government more efficient and provide better citizen-facing services. And additionally, federal standards and onerous regulations cannot get in the way of AI innovation. And instead of regulations, regulations should be focusing on addressing ethical, security, privacy concerns that are not covered by existing regulatory frameworks. These efforts must advance emerging technologies so that we can stay competitive in an AI-driven economy. I'm working on that legislation right now. If you all have feedback on this, we're going to be putting out a framework pretty soon. To have some smart folks like y'all provide that input is really important. But thank you not only for what you do for your individual entities, but thank you for what you are doing for our country. I tell folks all the time, an authoritarian government may be able to move all their factors of production in one direction and get someplace quicker. But I will always take entrepreneurship, creativity, and ingenuity over an authoritarian government. And y'all are the ones that make me feel comfortable about our future in this area. So thanks for your time today, and thanks to DOE for having me. And God bless y'all, and may God continue to bless these United States of America.
Before our next session begins, we'd like to remind members of the press that there will be media availability with Secretary Perry and other speakers in the Drake Room, which is across from registration. Please head there at 10:30 to set up by 10:45. To continue our session here, please welcome back Rick Stevens, Associate Laboratory Director at Argonne National Laboratory.
Okay, thank you. It's my great pleasure to introduce John Kelly from IBM. You already had some mentions, got some shout outs there. I've known John for quite a while. We were trying to estimate the first time we interacted. It was 15, 20 years ago. John has nearly 4 decades of experience running innovation and leading technology development. He's been at IBM for all this time. He has led various roles inside of IBM, from pushing forward on semiconductor technology to supercomputers and AI and cognitive systems. He's won many awards, including RPI's Lifetime Achievement Award and the semiconductor industry's highest honor, the Robert and Noyce Award. Like many of us, Dr. Kelly is passionate about AI. He believes it's really the only way to deal with the masses of data that we're now collecting, particularly in healthcare. A little known fact about John is that he has a passion for the history of technology. During the recent 50-year anniversary celebration of the Apollo moon landing, John dropped everything and went to Houston to meet former IBMers that worked on the project. So with that, please welcome John Kelly.
Thank you, Rick, and good morning, everyone. In a sense, I think the stage has been set for my comments, but I'd like to spend the next 20, 30 minutes talking not only about where we are and where we're going, but how are we going to realize the Secretary's vision? Because I agree with him that we are at a very special moment in time. And as Rick said, that's coming from a guy who's been in this industry for 4 decades and has seen pretty much everything. Also, as Will said, what we're about to go through and what we're about to do will make everything else we've done in the past, in a sense, look trivial. And hopefully by the time I'm done, you'll agree with me and you'll understand what I'm about to say. We need to take a hard left turn, and we need to take a quantum leap. Now let me explain to you what I mean by that. So to frame the discussion, I think it's important to begin with, where have we come from to understand where we're going? Well, this century opened up with tabulating machines, which were basically counting devices, which went on to revolutionize businesses in many respects, and it was built on mechanical switches and vacuum tubes and other kinds of technology, and many great companies, including the IBM company, were founded in those days. By the way, very few companies made it through the subsequent transitions, because deep shifts in technology, big shifts, bring society forward, but in the industrial world also kill companies. We have spent, though, the last half of a century in an era of programmable computing. And fundamentally, we got there because we had pushed transistors and Moore's law to the point where we could put programs inside the density of the memory and cause the computer to do what we programmed it to do. By the way, nothing else than what we programmed it to do. And that's been an amazing, amazing ride for society and for technology, and I've spent, as many of you, our entire careers in that programmable era. And the systems that we've created today with those transistor counts and Moore's law and computing as we know it, programmable computing, are absolutely incredible. Who thought we would have had the compute power in our pockets to bring us global weather forecasting in an instant, as an example? Who thought that the System 360 mainframes would still be doing every major financial transaction on the planet, whether it's a credit card or international currency trade? And who thought that we would have supercomputers like Summit and Sierra operating at 200 petaflops? That is the culmination of over half a century of technology. But at their heart, they are still only transistor-based and only programmable computers. So the question is, do we continue on this path, or are there other ways to accelerate and start to create the future that the Secretary pointed to in his comments, and where Rick and the team at DOE are trying to pull us all? I would argue that we are now at this point where we are entering a completely new era of computing. This is no longer a linear extrapolation of what we've done for the past half century. And what will dominate this new era of computing will be, as we discussed this morning, artificial intelligence and the underlying technologies, as well as quantum computing. And as you heard from my predecessor, this is no longer a lab experiment. This is serious business now in quantum computing. So put everything you know about where we've been sort of in a bucket, and now the question is, where do we go to unlock the future, the kinds of futures that John talked about in healthcare and pharmaceuticals, as just one example. So let me talk a little bit more about exactly where we are, because it's relevant to what we have to do in the future. So how did we get to this Summit and Sierra system? Well, once again, I can't speak for this whole lineage of time, but for most of it. There were two parallel paths. The path of traditional computing, led by supercomputing and led by many of the folks in the room here, whereby we began with large-scale simple computers. We moved to vector systems in the 60s on those System 360s. We moved to parallel systems. And then in 2008, there was this little system that we built called Roadrunner for one at Sandia, for one of the big labs. And it was a hybrid system where we put inside that computer actually game processors that were used to pushing around pixels. And we proved to the world that we could build not only a petaflop at that time, but we could build a system that was hybrid at scale. And we then went on to build massively parallel systems based on that technology. Now, the early part of this decade was also an important time here because competitors were starting to beat the United States in the supercomputing race. And I remember a meeting, Dimitri, you and I met with the then Secretary of Energy, and we said we should not continue on a linear path of massively parallel systems. We should take a hard right turn. And that hard right turn was, let's go build not only a big flop system, but a big data system, and a big data system that was capable of doing artificial intelligence. And he agreed, the department agreed, and we took a hard right turn, and we went on to build Summit and Sierra. Now, we got the insight from that because we and IBM, and as was heard in the universities and the department, were in parallel working on artificial intelligence. In IBM, we used basically man versus machine as a metric of our progress in artificial intelligence. So all the way back to the early 50s, can a machine learn how to play checkers? Through the infamous chess match with Garry Kasparov, where Deep Blue managed to learn how to play chess, learn how the opponent was playing, and learn how to beat the human being. And then, of course, on to Jeopardy and natural language processing. But we brought these two paths together, the learnings from high-performance computing and artificial intelligence and data, to produce not only the world's largest traditional high-performance computing system, but the world's largest artificial intelligence system. And those systems today still set the record for machine learning in terms of time and speed. So a lot of technology coming together, and now we're at this moment having taken the right-hand turn. And to this day, over a year and a half later, or 5 years since we started, no one has produced a machine that beats that machine. And take note, that's the power of taking a hard turn, because other competitors cannot react when you're off a linear path. So, what are those machines doing today? Well, of course, they're doing all sorts of science in both of the national labs and, of course, the open science and access. But what I point to on this chart is not just the scale of the system or all of the wonderful modeling and science, but on the bottom right, we and people in the labs are finding now that we can use not just artificial intelligence to run big data experiments to gain insights, but we can use artificial intelligence inside the system and inside the program to optimize the models so that AI is informing the model that's running and the model is informing the artificial intelligence application. And the system is learning how to speed up the run of those applications. And we're seeing it in biology, physics, and a number of different science areas. And I think that's going to be the ultimate new capability that we're going to unlock with systems like this, where modeling and simulation and artificial intelligence are working hand in hand to speed up insights. So lots of great work will be done by these systems. Now let me give you a real-time example of what artificial intelligence is doing in the real world. And this is not science fiction or pointing to the future. This is today. So let me take the field of healthcare. Let me take that nasty disease of cancer, and let me talk about oncology. Let me divide the problem up into 4 areas: early detection of cancer, diagnosis and treatment. God forbid it reoccurs, and unfortunately it often reoccurs. And then you're into finding what clinical trials can I possibly get in that could save my life or a loved one's life. What are we doing today? Well, we have proven that in early detection that man and machine, AI, can outperform a man, a radiologist, or a machine at detecting early cancer. And so now we're deploying and going through FDA trials of systems that will detect cancer earlier, not only in breast, but in prostate, liver, et cetera. So man and machine are proving to be better than either. The second stage, diagnosis and treatment. We took our AI system, lovingly called Watson, to Memorial Sloan Kettering, trained it in 16 cancers, 4 lines deep. That system last year, in 2018, working with doctors, man and machine, oncologist and machine, helped diagnose and inform treatments on 100,000 cancer patients. 100,000 cancer cases in 2018. And we know that it improved in many of those cases, the diagnosis and treatment. Next stage is, what if it reoccurs? This is a project we have going on with the Broad Institute to look at why does cancer reoccur? And of course the theory is that at time 0 treatment, we are not catching all of the mutations, and some of those mutations make it through and move on, and so we have to go back and treat and treat and treat. Well, working with Broad, we believe that we can, through blood liquid biopsies, look at the progression of cancer before and after multiple treatments and determine at time 0 what treatment would have stopped all mutations at that point in time and hopefully prevent the reoccurrence. We believe that that is possible now with artificial intelligence and modeling of rebuilding those mutations in the DNA sequence. And then lastly, clinical trials. Not science fiction. We trained our artificial intelligence machine with Mayo Clinic to basically match individual patients and their characteristics to individual clinical trials, a process which takes humans a day to day and a half to do because there are thousands of clinical trials and hundreds of exclusion criteria for every patient. We trained the machine to do that, and today at Mayo Clinic, 100% of the women with stage 3 and stage 4 breast cancer, their case is run through Watson for clinical trial matching, and we have nearly doubled the percentage of women getting into clinical trials today using artificial intelligence at Mayo Clinic. So this is not a pipe dream. This is reality of just one case, one disease state. So how are we doing that today? Well, if you open up the covers on these great Summit and Sierra systems, we've done it because, again, we took a right turn. We recognized that it was no longer just more massively parallel systems. Let's get smart about this. Let's go in there and let's put not only lots of memory, but the right kind of memory connected into these systems. And we said, let's put some accelerators in there, in this case GPUs, to accelerate the learning processes for artificial intelligence. And we've had a partner, NVIDIA, who helped us through that stage, and of course, massively parallel and core processors. And the result of that is we produced a system which is #1 in flops and #1 in AI in the world, working together with Department of Energy and our partners. So the right turn worked. But I'm here to tell you today that that right turn, as good as it was, it's time for a left turn. We cannot continue on this because that system, as big and beautiful as it is, and just as the secretary loves all their labs, I love all my supercomputers equally. Summit and Sarah are my children, and I'd love to have more children like this, but it is time to take a hard left turn. And the reason is very simple. As good as that system is, it can barely scratch the surface of the kinds of artificial intelligence problems that we want to address, that Rick is dreaming of. And by the way, that system requires 13 million watts of power. 13 megawatts versus the 20 megawatts between our ears. We cannot continue on that right turn. We need a hard left turn. So we need to completely reinvent the computing stack, all the way from the core devices through the system level architecture, through the artificial intelligence algorithms which are rapidly changing at exponential rates, through the intersection of the fact that with technologies like 5G, we're not going to have all the artificial intelligence in these big data centers or these big Summit and Sierra systems. That artificial intelligence is going to move out to the edge and move to where the data is. And that means that we have to be more clever about how we distribute the artificial intelligence in these massive networks. So everything has to change. We have to take a hard left turn. At the device level, the reason we're doing 13 megawatts in those systems, and that number will only keep going up. By the way, if we weren't really clever, that number would be a gigawatt. But we managed to keep it to reasonable levels. So this is the log of performance of these accelerators for artificial intelligence. These blue dots are these GPUs that we've been using, which are fantastic. But they're riding Moore's Law. And Moore's Law can only get us so far, and they're consuming massive amounts of power along with our CPUs. We need to take this hard left turn, and we need to come up with new kinds of devices. Those yellow dots, and people in the back may not be able to read. But we can no longer use high precision compute in something like artificial intelligence that only requires low precision compute. It's a bit of a mind twister. But we have proven and published many papers that 2 and 4-bit computing in AI is every bit as good and accurate as 64, 32, and 16-bit computing. We have to shift to low-power devices. We have to shift to low-power analog, much like what's between our ears. And we need to advance new materials that store information and process information in an AI world more like neuromorphic devices than these hardwired transistor-based systems. Now, even after we make that hard left turn with those kinds of devices in an entirely new AI stack, there are still problems in this world, and this is to Rick's question, what are we going to do? That none of those systems, even after the hard left turn, will be able to solve with classical computing. As an example, very large optimization problems where you want to solve precisely in the optimization, not make many approximations, cannot be solved with classical computing. Not in our lifetimes or our kids' lifetimes, if forever. Example, can we design and build a molecule, a large molecule, although not that big, a molecule that most of us put in our bodies this morning, caffeine. You cannot design that molecule from the ground up, minimizing the energy states on a classical computer, ever. You need a computer to do that. You cannot precisely model the world's economy and economic transactions with a classical computer without massive approximations. You cannot model the supply chains of your automobile with all of its electronics and suppliers in an optimum way, even with a Summit or Sierra. We need a system that is built for optimization. If you don't remember anything I say this morning, remember this. The future of computing is not only around the bits we're used to, but these neuromorphic, low precision, low power devices, but also quantum computing or qubits. And the future, the quantum leap, is this. Putting these three together, we are going to be able to do things that we can simply not imagine. Can we do it? Rick, I don't know how. I have some ideas, but I believe we can do it. And the reason we need to do this is because this Moore's Law that we've ridden for the last half century has been a great ride, but it is slowing, and it'll never get us to solve those problems I talked about. We need to go to this other exponential, which is around quantum computing, where quantum computing is advancing as to the n, where n is the number of qubits, as long as the qubits are coherent. That's a whole different presentation. Now, some people think quantum computing is an experiment. You're not keeping up. This is the history over the past few decades of quantum computing. When I went to universities in the 70s, I studied my physics books. There was no reality. In 1981, there was a conference between MIT and IBM. Richard Feynman's in that picture, by the way. The guy taking the picture is an IBM fellow. But they came out of that meeting in 1981 and said, geez, we may be able to go from textbooks to a real computer. Long story short, through decades of research and development, we have now built the world's largest, fastest, multiple copies of this commercial quantum computer. It sits today at 20 qubits, accessible, running 24/7. It's run, as you can see from the chart, millions of quantum experiments. It's got 160,000 users as of this moment. It'll probably be 200,000 by the end of the month. And it is a full hardware software stack. And by the end of this month, we've announced that will go to 53 qubits, more than double. We are on a track to double the quantum capacity of those computers every 12 months. And when we do that, we will be able to accomplish and go after those problems that I described before. It's not just us that believes in this. I'm happy to see Argonne, a number of the national labs, but you see companies like ExxonMobil, you see companies on there like Samsung, you see automotive companies, aerospace companies. They believe they are going to be able to solve the problems in their industry that they cannot solve otherwise. Now, that's the what. Let me then just end with, how are we going to do this? And I want to echo what has been said before. We're going to do this through a public-private academic partnership. In the 1960s, the US government came to IBM and said, we need a fully transistorized computer system for the Defense Department, for missile guidance. And we built a system called Stretch, which was the first all-transistor computer. In the late 50s, after Sputnik, in the early 60s, Gene Kranz and the guys down in Houston came to IBM and said, we got to put a man on the moon, and our computer systems, we can't pack the programs in it. We'll never, even if we could get the man there, we can't get him back. Can you build us a computer system to get us there? We said, we'll do it with the System 360. In 1960, the System 360 didn't exist. Didn't exist commercially until 1964. So we said we'd do it before it even existed. In the early 1990s, the Department of Energy came to IBM and said, we want to stop physically testing our nuclear stockpile. We need computer systems that will advance faster than Moore's Law. Can you do it? We said, we think so. We've never done it. And we went on to build massively parallel systems, which to this day have kept us off the physical testing map. So in every case, it's been a public, private, and by the way, academia was involved in every one of these project where we shot ahead of the duck and we made it happen. So I think we now need to look at the world's biggest problems. And I don't know whether it's in healthcare, as John says, whether it's in climate change or energy distribution or further exploring space or education. We need to pick the thing that's going to bring us together and cause us to really advance this technology at an accelerated pace. We need to take a hard left turn, and we need to take a quantum leap. And again, I think that the only way we're going to do that is through this public-private academic partnership. And I'll end with, I've been around a long time and I've seen a lot. These two technologies of artificial intelligence and quantum computing are like nothing we've ever seen before. And the rate and pace at which they're advancing, there will only be one number one company or country that develops these technologies. There is no number two. And I look forward to working with the department and everyone in this room to make this a reality. Thank you very much.